This lesson is titled Data or Theoretical Saturation. This is one of the lessons in the program titled Understanding Qualitative Research. In this specific lesson, I will address what is data or theoretical saturation. I will help you understand how to achieve data saturation, and I will conclude this lesson, as I do all lessons, with a reflective summary of what I addressed. Data or theoretical saturation. What's the difference between data saturation and theoretical saturation? Actually, there is no difference other than the words, data and theoretical. There are some people of the school of thought that suggest that data saturation is more appropriate terminology because the idea is that the data is saturated and you will not get any more new information. There's the other school of thought, the theoretical saturation, that suggests that you cannot be certain that if you didn't interview more people, you wouldn't find something new. But yet, theoretically, something may be new. There's no sense to continue on because it's unlikely if you've done your research well. I tend to believe that the correct name is theoretical saturation because we cannot be certain that by doing more interviews, we would not find something new, which data saturation kind of lends us to believe that there's no need to continue on because we will not find anything because we've saturated the data. Well, you'll have to decide what you believe is best. If you're going to gain more insights on this idea of saturation, I would encourage you to review both data and theoretical saturation in the literature and see what you find to be true, and maybe you'll have your own thoughts, your own school of thought about what is the most correct word. I was taught, and I do believe that theoretical saturation is the correct word and phrasing, but since data saturation tends to be the more commonly used phrase, I'll probably address the concept in this lesson more so as data saturation. But at least you'll know what I tend to believe, right, wrong, or indifferent. Saturation is a tool. Think of it as a tool in your toolbox that allows you to have the ability to say, I do not need to collect more data. I have found what's common amongst all those people I interviewed, and more than likely, I'm not going to find something new. So a tool helps us to complete a project. A tool helps us to adjust something. A tool, in the sense of data saturation, it allows us to use it in different ways, and I'm going to share a few of those ways here. But if you think of saturation as a tool to completing your dissertation or any research that you're doing outside of a doctoral dissertation, or just perhaps you want to learn more, the idea of all these different tools is what allows us to improve the issues of trustworthiness in qualitative research. And trustworthiness is a complete separate lesson in this program as well. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy because while it may be scientific, it's also pretty subjective. And the whole idea behind a philosophy is it may not necessarily be true 100% of the time. A philosophy tends to come from past applications, past stories, past beliefs about something. And so the essence of it being a philosophy is one that we can talk about. It's one that we can have different opinions about. And I have spoken to a lot of different researchers, many of them faculty, some who are just professional researchers, and that's what they do. They don't necessarily teach it, but they work in think tanks. Perhaps they work in research centers or corporate research departments. And we can have a conversation about what saturation means and find that there's different applications. Doesn't mean anyone is right or wrong. It just means that there is room for different interpretations. As much is the case with much research, that you can do a case study many different ways. You can do a phenomenological design many different ways. You can do quantitative research many different ways. Not necessarily would any of them be completely 100% correct or 100% wrong. There is some variation, and theoretical or data saturation is no different. And therefore, it's not an agreed concept. Many of my co-facilitators at universities, they would be peer faculty or teach research courses, they have their own twist on what they believe is true. And I'm going to share a couple ideas here and things that I've experienced in this lesson with you so that you can get a sense for why it is not an agreed concept. I mean, just from the very beginning, the idea of whether it's data or theoretical saturation is a great example because most people can't agree 100% on what to even call it, let alone how to do it. And there are many different ways to test for data saturation, but you have to test for it. The problem is that many students early on in their research, particularly if they're doing academic research like a doctoral dissertation, have never done it before. They're being guided by faculty, and as I mentioned, many different faculty have different ideas on what saturation should mean, and therefore it's not an agreed concept. Belief behind saturation is that we seek to find commonalities. If you are going to identify and report the lived experiences of people in a phenomena, you might interview anywhere between 10 and 20 people, and the idea is that you're going to identify and report what's common with them. You're going to find out what's common amongst the people that you interviewed in regards to your interview questions. When they give you their findings, you're going to create some themes, and from those themes, you're going to make some findings, some recommendations, and some conclusions. And that's what we're hoping to get when we do qualitative research, in particular, these commonalities. Now, don't confuse what's common, as we might do in a case study, and determine whether the common understandings of people from 4 or 5 different cases. That's a little bit different. Yes, we still want to find what's common amongst the people in each case, and then put all those individual cases together for one big case and find out what's common amongst them all. But saturation is not necessarily applied to a case study, whereas it is in a phenomenological design, where you may be interviewing 15 people, for example, and they all have the same background. They all have the same understandings of what the phenomena is that they're involved with. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily in different cases. So the idea of saturation is for us to be able to comfortably declare that we can stop doing our research data collection because we will not gain more insights, or theoretically, we will not gain more insights by interviewing more people. More is not always better. Sometimes more is just more, particularly in research. It's not about getting 100 people to interview when 15 or 20 will be more than enough. Seeks to substantiate themes. When we create themes in qualitative research, it comes from the combined input and the analysis from the synthesis of all the answers to interview questions. So when we're looking to analyze the data or all the interview comments, and we're looking to somehow evaluate them, we want to look at creating that analysis in the sense of themes. What are these common themes amongst the people that we interviewed? Saturation helps us substantiate that these themes are credible. If you only interviewed 2 people, you may not have enough to substantiate any themes, whereas if you sought saturation after 13 or 15 people, then you would be able to substantiate your themes with the appropriate amount of data. Data in this case meaning the narrative data from the interviews. This saturation allows us to support smaller sample sizes. This is why I could interview a lot of people, meaning a lot, 100 or fewer, and get better data from interviewing fewer, because saturation allows us to focus on fewer people and get inputs to the point where there's no new themes, no new information emerging, rather than doing hundreds and then having all sorts of data that could confuse the analysis later. As I mentioned, more interviews is not always better. We want to do what's appropriate, what's going to provide us sound and systematic research findings. And saturation allows us to do this. So when my students, and I'll share with you how I have them test for saturation in a few minutes in this lesson, I have them indicate that they're going to interview 20 people or until data saturation is achieved. If data saturation is achieved before 20, they can stop. If not, they continue on. The point being that 20 provides a scope for the work in the proposal phase, but then if saturation is achieved sooner, they can stop. The most important point here in, for example, phenomenology is that we stop when we hit saturation. This idea of data or theoretical saturation is not appropriate for all qualitative research designs. And this is where some of the confusion comes in, or the differences amongst faculty school of thought, is that why would you want to, or do you need to, test for saturation if you're only interviewing 5 people from 4 different stakeholder groups? What are you going to seek? Saturation from 5 people? It's not to say you can't find saturation, but what is the value? The value is that in a case study, particularly a multiple case study, if you're going to interview 5 people from 4 different stakeholder groups, the idea is that you're going to find out what's common in each of those stakeholder groups, and then collectively, once they're all done, and you are able to find out what's reflective of the whole. Whereas in phenomenology, for example, we are not interviewing people from different areas, but people who have involvement in the same phenomena. So you wouldn't only interview 5 people. That's not to say 5 people can't be good research if there's only 5 people in the company. That's a little bit different, but that may not be significant or substantial for doctoral dissertation research. And this is part of the concern that if you read many books about saturation, you're going to find a lot of different answers. And not all of them are directed at what's best for dissertation research. Dissertation research has to be something in the sense that what's produced is substantial and significant in regards to research findings. That means people can actually use it and do something with it. If all you had was a company of 5 people and you interviewed those 5 people, that's not necessarily bad research. That could be great research, but it doesn't meet the threshold of a doctoral dissertation. And so as you go through understanding my program that I'm sharing, as you listen to all the lessons, keep in mind that if you happen to be a researcher in a corporate organization or a faculty member learning about research more so that you can be a dissertation chair perhaps, that there's a difference between what's good research and what's dissertation research. And that difference is usually scope of data, scope of work that needs to be produced at the end. So as there are different approaches to testing for saturation, how do you know when you achieve this saturation, where you can stop? That too is going to be subjective. Sorry to say this, but this is the reality of research, that if you talk with 10 faculty members, you're probably going to find at least 4 different ways on how one will test to know that they achieved saturation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to guide you on my approach. Every mentee I have worked with since the year 2000, so over 20 years now, I have had them apply this approach. I've used it also in my same approach in organizations and doing federally funded research through grants. So this works, and you may decide that you want to have some variation of it. That's not going to be a concern as long as you probably have some way of substantiating the reality of why it's appropriate. As long as you can indicate why it's appropriate, then not a big concern, as long as whoever you're trying to justify it to will agree with you. So the first thing I do is I have my students in their proposal say that they're going to interview 20 until saturation is achieved. Now that's just proposing it. When they actually do the data collection, I have them interview 12 people without doing any data analysis other than hand coding from one interview to the next. I don't ask them, and I actually ask them not to put their data into in vivo and run the data and find out what the results are from in vivo software, in the sense of what nodes are produced out of there to create themes. I want them to go into just doing 12 interviews. And once they do those 12 interviews, then I want them to generate the themes. I want them to use their hand coding. I want them to classify it or categorize it, perhaps put it into an affinity diagram and find out what they have from their hand coding, and also then put the interview data into in vivo software. When you put it into in vivo software, you have to strip out from all the interviews, the 12 interviews, whether the answers to only interview question number 1 and put that in a file and put that in vivo. Then interview question number 2, what are the 12 responses you have from everyone. And you put those transcribed interviews, answers into in vivo software. You generate the themes. And now that you have themes generated from hand coding and from in vivo software, you have a pretty good chance of having an understanding of what was common amongst those 12 people. Then interview 3 more people. So interview number 13, 14, and 15, and do that the exact same way as you did the first 12. No difference. The same questions, the same approach, the same script if you have a script. And now what you do then, if no new themes emerge from those 3 when you interviewed number 13, 14, and 15, then you can say you're done. So basically what you would do is once you interview those 3 more, you would take that information, again, do some hand coding. You would then also look at the results of in vivo software just for those 3 interviews, and then you compare it to the findings of the first 12. If no new themes emerge, bam, you're done. You can say you have tested and achieved data saturation. But if new themes emerge, then you have to interview 3 more. So when you interviewed numbers 13, 14, and 15, if a new theme emerged, then you have to interview 16, 17, and 18. And you then repeat the process. If no new themes emerge from those 3, numbers 16, 17, and 18, you're done. But if a new theme does emerge, guess what? Then you're going to have to interview 19, 20, and 21. More than likely, if you have done well and aligned your interview questions to your research question, and when you did the interviews, you stayed focused as an interviewer to gain the insights from those you interviewed, and you didn't get involved in a large conversation which took all the data off track, you will probably find saturation at numbers 15 or 18, 21 at the latest. How you find saturation tells us, in a way, how your research was designed. If you didn't hit saturation till 27 or 30 interviews, then chances are something happened in the data collection process where you, as the interviewer, might have led the person you interviewed or the people you interviewed astray. You got involved in conversation, you asked for too many examples. There's a lot we can gain from deciphering when saturation is achieved, because logically, if you have your work aligned well because you did experts in the sense of having them analyze your interview questions before your proposal was approved or gave you insights to make sure they were focused, and you did the idea of that field test with your questions with research experts, then more than likely you should have found saturation somewhere between 12, 15, 18. Now, I've seen dissertations where faculty had their mentees do 9 interviews and then do 3 more for testing. There's no requirement for a set number. This is going to be variable based on how many people are in the research population, how many you can actually get access to, and the reality of how many people will engage and provide information to you. And at the time of this recording, just coming out of the COVID-19 phenomena, it has been extremely difficult for many students to get 15, 18, 20 people to interview, because it's not as easy when people are working from home. They've got a lot of stress in their lives. They're trying to make things work for themselves, let alone have a lot of time to offer others for being involved in research that they're not getting paid for particularly. So the idea of saturation, again, is subjective, but this path that I laid out here for you, where you interview 12 people, then 3 more, and if no new themes emerge, you stop. If something emerges, you continue on 3 at a time. This works. And it's sound, it's systematic. You can see exactly how it's being tested. And like I said, I've been using this approach with my mentees for years, and I've never had a concern from a university leadership perspective that's saying that this is inaccurate. I've had other faculty say, well, why do you interview so many or so few? That's the subjectiveness of the work. And I can substantiate with my school of thought because others have done this and then have approved research with this process. In reflection, the idea of data theoretical saturation in of itself is a little bit confusing, because data and theoretical saturation is often found differently in different literature sources, in different research books. Some will call it data saturation, some will call it theoretical saturation. Whatever you decide to call it and however you're going to apply it, I encourage you to find your own definition and support it. As I mentioned, I believe it's theoretical in nature because of the reality is that we can never prove without a doubt that there will not be some new information that we just didn't have the opportunity to find out. Or perhaps even we found it out and it didn't show up as a theme, so we dismissed it. The reality of data saturation in of itself, to me, suggests that we know without a doubt we have saturated the data and there could be nothing new. That is a difference of opinion, whatever yours is going to be. I encourage you, like anything else with research, is decide what is your point of view, what is your school of thought. Then support it with some literature so when you're in a conversation that you can be a reflective consumer of research. Ideally, with dissertation students and faculty, you have to be first a consumer of research, an informed consumer of research. From that point, then you can actually go do research. But if you're not a good, well-informed consumer of research, you may be doing things that are not practical or even correct. In this lesson, I gave you a strategy on how to achieve data saturation. That saturation could be achieved by interviewing 12 people, then you run the data, and then you interview 3 more. If nothing new emerges, you can say, I'm done collecting data. Now I want to write chapter 4 and 5 and graduate. But if you find a new theme or themes, then you just do 3 more at a time until you can actually achieve that data saturation. As I mentioned in all my lessons, there's help out there for you, by me, a research expert. I am what I believe to be a dissertation completion expert. I've been doing this for 20 years. I should be, right? I've been doing it as a dean at a university. I've been an academic reviewer at different universities on behalf of the university staff, and I've been dissertation chair, committee member, you name it. At the many different universities around the world, I've played various roles. I published myself. I have paid grants that I've been federally funded with, corporate research. I think I know enough to help you. So I'm willing to help you. All you got to do is go to my Facebook group or page and post something in there. You can find out through my website and you can email me directly. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And again, if you believe what you heard in these lessons is helpful to you, do me a favor. Please share it with others so that they can find out too and learn even more. And one thing I want to let you know about, as I have in several lessons given you insights on different tools and programs I have, I do have an ebook. It's free. Free is good. All you have to do is go to my website and download it. And in it, you'll find the items here on the right-hand side of the screen, 26 tips to complete your degree without losing your mind. Wouldn't that be good to know? Or how about 5 reasons why dissertations do not get finished? So you can make sure that you have none of those reasons in your work, along with 8 strategies to finish your dissertation. All of a sudden, now you got 5 reasons why they don't get approved. Now you got 8 on why they do. So you got 13 different things there that I'm going to help you with. I also have 7 secrets to completing a dissertation that you wish you knew sooner. Imagine learning the things I'm going to share with you in my free ebook. If you'd known them sooner, you probably would be done by now. And I have 12 myths and tips for scholarly writing that you can master easily. Improve the writing, improve the readability of your work, and it's going to get approved sooner. That's all in my ebook titled Strategies and Tips to Complete a Doctoral Dissertation Program. It's available at the website below where you see that under the download the free ebook. Again, did I mention it's free? Free is good. And you can download that immediately. You can save it to your computer. You can print it. You can do whatever you would like with it. I encourage you to read it. I encourage you to tell your friends about this as well. Let me help them. And ending this lesson, data saturation helps us improve trustworthiness. Trustworthiness is the result of our work on how valid or reliable qualitative research is, particularly our findings. I have a lesson on trustworthiness in this program. I encourage you, if you haven't yet, listen to that lesson. Let me help you better understand all the different factors of trustworthiness. I'm Dr. Rich Schuttler. Thank you for listening.